Namaste everyone. In today's video, we're going to focus on Muni Patanjali's Yoga Sutra 3.9. Now in this Yoga Sutra, Muni Patanjali is helping us to understand the transformations or what really takes place after the deep practice of Sanyam and the meditative processes. So let's take a good look at this sutra, which is particularly long, and start understanding it a little bit better. The sutra itself goes: Vyuthana Nirodha Sanskara Yora Bhibhava Pradur Bhavau Nirodha Kshana Chittanvayo Nirodha Parinamaha. Alright, so that is quite a long and detailed sutra there, but don't worry, we're going to break it up word by word to start understanding it a little bit better. So now, starting with the first word itself, the first word we have here is Vyuthana. Now this particular word is referencing something that is going out or that is disappearing or becoming less. So Vyuthana refers to outgoing, a distraction or something that's becoming less, but basically it means something that's going to the outside. Then comes the next word, which is Nirodha. And Nirodha, as we've studied even in Sutra 1.2, is basically talking about the cessation and the reduction or the stoppage in something. So Vyuthana Nirodha is a compound word that's being used here. Then we come to the next word, which is Sanskara or Sanskara Yora, while pronouncing the sutra, and this basically is referring to sanskar or the impression that is created in a particular person or that person's chitta during this process. So sanskaras are the impressions. Then moving to the next one, we have abhibhava or abhibhava, which refers to the, again, reduction, the dwindling and ultimate disappearance of something. So it's basically referencing something that's happening in the chitta, which we'll come to in the explanation. And then finally we move to the next word, which is pradurbhava. And pradurbhava is an interesting word because it's talking about the appearance of something. So the previous section of the sutra was talking about disappearing, movement, outgoing. Here it's now talking about appearance and arising with this first word, pradurbhava. Then coming to the next word, we have Nirodha Kshana. Okay, I know for some of you it is challenging to pronounce kshan, which is a pretty common Hindi and Sanskrit term referring to a point or a period of time. Usually very loosely it's translated to a second or a moment, but kshan means it's just a very small quantum of time. So that is kshan. Now we talk about Nirodha Kshan, which refers to the stoppage or the instant in which the Nirodha is taking place or that reduction is taking place. Then coming to the next word, we have Chittanvaya, which basically is referring to Chitta, which is the consciousness. And here we've taken Anvaya, which refers to contact. And funnily enough, that is also my brother's name. So it's very funny. When I first read this, I was like, oh, Anvaya, his name is in this sutra. But basically it refers to contact or coming in contact with. In many other ways, it also refers to bridging the gap or kind of bringing something together in contact. So that is Chittanvaya, and we're talking about the contact of the chitta. And then finally we come to the last word, which is Nirodha Parinam, and this is saying Nirodha, which is of course the cessation. We're talking about reduction, stoppage, and Parinam is again a very commonly used word in the Indian Hindi language, which means the result of something or the transformation of something and what happens as a result of that. So, a lot of different words. Please feel free to go back and pause the video if you need to in certain sections to observe and understand it more carefully. But let's look at what is the sutra trying to tell us overall. Alright, so it's defining for us this Nirodha Parinam. And why is this so important is because we need to know right? Like we discussed in the first chapter that yoga is the cessation of the thought waves, etc. And now in this sutra, we're being told, here's what happens when that parinama or that result takes place, where for a couple of seconds or for very small amounts of time, there's actually that nirodha or that nothingness that takes place in our minds. So it's telling us what is happening or how does it really happen in this process. So it's saying that when the chitta or the consciousness comes in contact with a moment of nirodha or nothingness or complete stoppage, that means the old vritti or the old thought wave which was there is now dwindling and kind of going away, making an exit, and the new sanskara, the new impression is being created of this nothingness or this nirodha. Okay, so this is a little bit of a subtle concept to understand, but what you can imagine is if you're taking something out of a jar and immediately replacing it with something else, that's kind of like what's happening here. So let's say, for example, I have a little bowl or a little jar with me. There's a rock in it, and I put my hand in and remove that rock. That's kind of how the old vrittis are going out. And as soon as I remove that rock, let's say, for example, somebody else pours a little bit of water there. So that little bit of water is now the new sanskar that is being created, which takes the place of the earlier vritti. So that's why there's this incoming, outgoing kind of, explanation being given here, where one vritti goes away and the new sanskara of nirodha takes place in the mind. Now, some commentators have defined this a bit differently. They're also saying that it's not only the vritti, it could be our association with the world or our worldly knowledge which is leaving and a deeper spiritual knowledge is taking its place. So either way, essentially, it's still telling us the same thing about something going out and something else taking its place in our consciousness and in our chitta. Now, very important to understand this because it's the chitta or the consciousness will only experience the result of this if it becomes aware that this is happening, right? If it doesn't realize that a new sanskara has taken its place, or it doesn't realize that gap, between the rock going out and the water coming in, if it doesn't become aware of that gap, it may not experience this parinama that we're talking about. Okay, so I know this is quite subtle. It'll take a little bit of time to understand this as well, but it's so important for the upcoming sutras because the upcoming sutras talk about a specific vibhuti or a power in which the knowledge of the past, present, and future can be gained, and that requires a little bit of understanding of this particular sutra which talks about the transformation that takes place in the chitta. Alright, so stay with me. You're getting it, it's happening. We're gonna now dive a little bit deeper into the sutra, but this was the basic explanation. Now let's go even further in. Alright, now to further understand this concept, we can take the example of a pendulum or of our breathing patterns. This is an amazing example because if you've ever noticed the way a pendulum swings, it goes from the center over to the right side, and there's this very small, fraction of a second, barely any time, where it's reached its maximum potential on the right side, and before it starts its swing over to the other side, there's this fraction of a second of a pause, if you ever notice it carefully. The same can be said about the breathing pattern. When we're taking a deep inhale, just before we exhale, there's a very tiny pause there where there's nothingness. It's so small, it's so hard to even become aware of it, but it exists in that space. And so that is a very, very important pause, and that is being compared to the process of nirodha that the chitta experiences. It's like the old thought wave moved out, and there was a small little pause, and then the new sanskara came in. But for this complete transformation to take place, and for the person or the chitta to become aware of what's going on, they need to have experienced that very small quantum of time deeply. So that's why it's so challenging, because there's so much going on in the mind at any given point of time, that to experience such a small state where there's a sense of nothingness and then becoming aware of that without introducing newer thought waves into it, it's super challenging. It's like saying that you have to become aware of it, know that that's happening for like barely any seconds, and only then can you experience the total transformation of the chitta when the chitta becomes aware of it. Now, in the early stages of meditation, even if you are reaching such a deep stage, crossing the Nirbija Samadhi, etc., reaching these kind of transformations, you may not be aware of it, because it happens in such a small fraction of a second that we miss that gap. We don't realize that it's come. And because we don't realize it, we don't slip further into the subtle realms. We stay still in the sort of material realm even now. So it is a very, very specific process, I would say. It requires a very large amount of awareness of the chitta, and when this kind of awareness is cultivated over a period of time and the chitta can absorb even the slightest movements or changes in the consciousness or in the mind, that is when the parinama will be experienced to its highest extent. So it takes some time to get there, and that's why the word in this sutra, kshan, is very important. Nirodha kshan. It's not saying that, the time period of Nirodha. No, it's telling us that it's a very small moment of time, and it's something that chitta has to be aware of to catch. Now, at a personal level, in a way, that is what the asana and pranayama are also training us to do. They're training us to really experience those things. And you know how we say, pay attention to your breath, become aware, look at what's happening. So this awareness is constantly being cultivated. It's like passing exams, you're going from first grade to second grade, etc. And then you reach like the 12th grade, you're at the end of high school, and that's where, if you've gone through the entire process of awareness properly, you have the right understanding, then you will reach that stage where when you're at the 12th grade, you'll be able to catch that kshana, that really tiny moment of time where there's nothingness. You'll be able to become aware of it because you cultivated such great awareness over your practice throughout all the Ashtangas. And that's why awareness is emphasized through and through in all the yogic practices and processes, so that in that one moment where it really matters, you're able to be aware and grasp what is needed to be grasped. So this is a little bit about Yoga Sutra 3.9. I hope you have been able to understand this. Of course, we go into it in much more depth in our courses, classes, and workshops. So if you're interested in understanding it even further, please feel free to hit the link in the description and come and join us for class or workshop. We'd love to see you and understand this entire concept with you much better. Now, if you've enjoyed today's video, please give it a big thumbs up, leave your thoughts in the comment section below, and do not forget to subscribe to our channel because we're releasing videos every single week. Now, we look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, take care, keep practicing, and we're going to see you very soon. Namaste.